Welcome back to Car-Pinionated, our weekly show about cars, the car industry, and driving in general. Joining us this week is Brian Moody, executive editor for Kelley Blue Book. Welcome back, Brian.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Good. So we're going to talk about cars and kids and safety, but I wanted to ask you first off, I've seen a lot of reports around the country of stockpiles of Teslas in old mall parking lots, old theater parking lots. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that? How does that happen?
Well, there's a couple things about Tesla that are unique. So first of all, Tesla is the top selling electric car across the country and by a pretty wide margin. That's the first thing. The second thing is Teslas don't have a typical dealership model. So it's very rare to find a Tesla dealership or a Tesla store with a lot of property to store cars. Unlike, let's say, if you look down the street, you see a Ford or a Toyota dealership, they have a lot of cars right there for you to pick from. Tesla's not like that. So it's not uncommon for them to purchase or lease land someplace away from the store to park the cars. Now, take that model and then combine it with electric vehicle sales have been slowing down. So they probably have made more than are selling right now. Just to be clear, though, because you see a lot of crazy stuff online, that isn't the same thing as saying nobody wants an electric car. People do want an electric car, specific people want an electric car, but the demand for that, although growing, is growing at a slower rate than most automakers had anticipated. And this is the case for Ford or BMW. Many are seeing record sales, but they're not growing as rapidly as they had thought. So when you look at Tesla, they've been selling at a certain rate. They produce cars at that rate. And then when it slows down, they have a little bit of an excess. Combine that with not having a real estate model like a typical dealership, and then you have the need to store Teslas in a large facility somewhere.
Yeah. And the rate was never going to be like a ski slope. It was going to
Right.
do this.
Right. It's really it was always going to be that way. What happens is, and I'm surprised that automakers didn't see this. They've been in this business for 100 years or more. You would think that they had seen this coming. But what happens is anything new, whether it's an iPhone, whether it's a new pair of Air Jordans, whatever the new thing is, there's a rush to get that new thing. Electric cars are similar. A Hummer electric pickup truck is cool and unique. I don't think that's saving the planet, but it certainly is cool and unique. So what you have is everyone rushing to this new thing, whether it's a Audi or a Hummer or a Chevrolet, whatever it is, they rush. And so all those early adopters, they got what they want. And so then it trails off a little bit because who's after the early adopters? Regular people like me and you who are just like, hey, I'm not rich. I just need a car that can work for me every single day. If that's electric, great. If that's a hybrid, great. You have to appeal to those people and convince those people electric will work for you. And that's where we are now. So you see a little bit of a tapering off in terms of sales demand, but the demand isn't dropping, it's growing, but it's just growing slightly more slowly than automakers would have anticipated. And remember, this is on the heels of lack of inventory. Remember, about a year and a half ago, we'd be having a whole different conversation. There was a Toyota dealership in Northern California that had one minivan for their whole area.
Yeah.
Well, guess what happens? The price goes up. Now we're at the opposite thing. We have lots of inventory. And so when you see lots of inventory, because that's what the demand was dictating, with a little bit of a tapering off, then you have, where do we keep these until they sell? And they probably will sell.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting you say about the Toyota dealership. There was one around here in Connecticut that has a huge lot and always had,
Right.
hundreds of cars. Maybe they had a dozen and it looked like half of them were used.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and now they're back to,
Of course. Yeah.
yeah. So, all right. I wanted to talk to you today about safety for cars and teenagers driving. And we know that the Memorial Day through Labor Day time period, there's a 20% spike in teenage accidents. And that's from the National Road Safety Foundation. What are your thoughts on safety ratings for cars and what parents can do to sort of start off the process with the safest car possible?
Right. So I think when we're talking about teen drivers, there's a couple things to consider. The car that a teen might want might not be the same thing as what's safest or what's best. A way to get around that is a parent can say, hey, we'll buy the car or we'll pay for part of it if you get a car that we approve. If not, you're on your own. Most kids would take the newer, nicer car because you know it's going to have safety features. These days, having a car without airbags is really, there's no excuse for that. I mean, you have to go back to the 90s. And I get that some people are strapped for money and everything, but it doesn't work today to say, well, my kid can save up his $1,000 and get a beater, only if it has the right safety equipment. And so when we talk about teen drivers, remember, they're just learning. They don't have the experience that you or I might have after having been driving for, a decade or more. And
Mhm.
so the kind of car you get for those kids matters, such as, do you want a car with a big power to weight ratio, meaning that it can get up to speed very quickly? No, you don't want that for a kid, because that just means you can get into trouble more quickly. Same with big trucks and SUVs. Yeah, a kid's going to say, oh, look at this lifted pickup truck. But those vehicles can tend to tip over in an emergency, and
Mhm.
you just don't know how to avoid that. When you're young, what do? You react. So it's better to have a car with a set certain safety features that I believe are easy to find and that's more low to the ground. So like say a typical crossover like a Honda HR-V, or maybe even a sedan like a Toyota Corolla or something like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, and when you're looking at cars, that speed factor is one thing, and as time goes by, more and more features are on a car,
Yes, yes.
more airbags. I mean, I had two
Yep.
cars that were, one was a 2001 and one was a 2005, and although they were both working, I like,
Hmm.
well, I'd like more airbags, I'd like more safety
Sure.
features in the car. And as you get newer, you get more of those features.
Yes, and I think, and I'm speaking from personal experience, not just saying, "Hey, this is what you all should do." I've been through this myself with my own kids. I know that you can get the minimum safety. So for me, and so for Kelly Blue Book, this is what we recommend. The minimum safety requirements would be, of course, airbags. Of course, that's easy to get these days. Also, head curtain airbags, meaning they deploy and they protect from head injuries. Also, traction control and also stability control. Those things, I know this for my own experience, you can find those things in a reliable car for well under $10,000. Sometimes you can even get them around $6,000 or $7,000. And here's a little tip that worked for me. If you find a car that's reasonably reliable, but at the time, say 2005, like you were saying, or 2006, 2007, but at the time, that was a relatively premium car, it's likely to have more safety features, but the price won't be a premium. So, for example, I bought my daughter a 2008 Saab 9.3 sedan. It has all those safety features. It's got low miles. She loves driving it. But at the time, that was a $45,000 car.
Yeah.
That's why it has advanced safety features. So look for that kind of thing where you're not spending a bunch of money, but you're still getting the safety and reliability that you want. And yeah, for parents, it means maybe doing a little bit of extra research.
How does somebody find these cars? What's the best way to go looking for these cars? Is it through dealers, or is it through private sellers?
You can do all of those things. What I suggest is using an online shopping tool, and there are many. Of course, I'm going to say use Kelly Blue Book or Auto Trader or one of those because they're well known. But when you go onto those sites, there are filters, and you can use those filters to find the specific car that you want. If you only want a convertible with a manual transmission and less than 100,000 miles, you can set all those parameters and your search results will only surface. Honestly, I've done this before too. If I wanted a manual transmission convertible that's blue with a tan interior, I can filter all that. And then my results will only see what I set up. I don't want, for example, I wouldn't want a black car. When you get a black car, you just signed up for a new hobby
Yeah.
called keeping your car clean. And I
Yeah.
don't want to do that. So I filter that out.
Yeah.
So using those tools and using those filters can get you the specific car that you want, and you can even set the price range. So that's one way. You can also look on places like Facebook Marketplace, or look at your local dealer and see what they have for what price. And honestly, when we do surveys, we find that most people, you know how they become aware of a specific car? They see it on the road, or they ask their neighbor, hey, what kind of a car is that? And they say, oh, this is a Toyota Camry. I love it.
Hmm.
That's a really good and valid way to eliminate cars. Pictures online can tell you something. So my wife will see a picture of a car and be like, no, I don't want that. Others, you come up with a group and then you have to go test drive, because sometimes when you see something in person, it looks different. Like in pictures, you can't always tell the scope or scale, but in person, you're like, oh, I see how big this is.
Yeah, yeah. And size is a real factor. I mean, I,
Sure.
if you have one of those big trucks in a small driveway, somebody's not going to be happy.
Yes. And also think about parking.
Yeah.
One thing that always comes up in these conversations is rear parking cameras. And while those can be important, a lot of driving schools specifically make the kids learn to drive and back into a parking space or parallel park without the aid of a camera. You can always add technology on top of what you already know, but it's harder to go back and remove technology.
Hmm.
So, looking at used cars, I know from personal experience, and people probably have found this too, cars that have a factory installed rear parking camera are a little bit more expensive. But you don't need to get one of those cars. You can add it in the aftermarket. So, you can find a $6,000 car, an $8,000 car, and for about $800, add Apple CarPlay and a rear parking camera.
Right, right.
So that's a way to go. Don't eliminate cars just because there's no factory backup camera. That's nice, of course, but you don't need to do that if you're on a budget.
So you would say front airbags, side curtain airbags.
Yep.
Um, I'm sure that somewhere in that $10,000 range, you get ADAS features. So the automatic
Some.
braking, the lane departure, things like that.
Yes.
Well, it sort of creeps in, and
It creeps in. Yeah.
yeah, and depending on what do you think is the kind of the cutoff year? Like I have a 2012 Subaru Forester,
Uh-huh.
and like I have the curtain airbags, but I don't have lane departure. I mean, I'd really like to have blind spot warning. Where's that year that kind of cuts that off?
So for the few that I was saying, which is airbags, curtain airbags, traction control, and stability control, if you just stick with those, I think you can go back to about 06, 07, something like that. The closer you get to 2000, like you had said before, there's a big change in technology. One of the reasons that you can't just say, oh, well, whatever's cheap, a lot of people who are Gen X, that kind of thing, here's what they got used to. From say 1960 to 1990, that 30-year period, the advances in safety features were essentially seatbelts, 3-point seatbelts, and maybe some crumple zone. That's it. ABS and that stuff didn't start till right around that point. But the jump from 1990 to 30 years ahead is massive.
Yeah.
So when we were kids, you could say, well, a car from the 70s or the 80s or the 90s, it's all kind of the same. They don't have airbags, they don't have anti-lock brakes. So they're just nicer versions of an old car. But today, there's huge leaps in technology. So I would advise getting as new a car as you can afford, but look for those features. And here's the really nitty gritty thing for parents and kids who are looking at these cars. When you get around 2010, 2009, 2008, anywhere in that, maybe even up to 2013, not every version of a specific model has the same safety features.
Right.
It used to be, so you know what I'm talking about because you've done this before. You're well versed in what trim levels are. You really have to look at what was standard on an LE versus an EX versus an RX versus an XLE, whatever the trim level is. They don't all have the same features. The perfect example is those Kias that some of them had the way to start the ignition without the key. Well, that's because it was a lower trim level that was
Yeah.
designed to be affordable. You
Mhm.
have to look at, not all Toyota Corollas in the past have the same safety features. You have to look at what trim level, and the higher the trim level, the better equipment you're going to get. It's not just about fancy wheels and a sunroof. So looking at a used car, get the XLE or the limited, because the price difference is only going to be a few $100,
Mhm.
but you're going to have all those extra safety features.
Plus, it's a lot nicer to be in a Lexus.
It is nice. Yeah, that's true too.
And a Camry. Camry's a perfectly fine car, but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that's true too.
So, all right. I appreciate it. Anything we missed?
I think that today, one thing you can look at is the mileage of used cars. Cars last a little bit longer. Right now, we know the average mileage of used cars for sale across the country is about 69,000 miles. So, depending on the brand, I don't know that I would buy a high performance European touring sedan for my kid with 200,000 miles on it, but around 100,000, if you're getting something like, Chevrolets, Hondas, Toyotas, Lexus for sure. A lot of those cars, no problem going, buying one that has 100,000 plus. When you get closer to two, you really have to make sure that it was taken care of properly beforehand.
Right, right. Well, great. I appreciate you taking the time. Um, this has been another week of Car-Pinionated. Join us next week. Remember to like and subscribe down on the bottom here, and we will see you soon. Take care.